So we can share this and have it, but I would love for you guys to open chat for just a second. And I would love for you to share with a change that you are experiencing. Maybe it's professionally or personally. And I want you to think about a recent change or one that you're in the middle of that you're making with happiness. That was golden. And I want you to also share, if you don't mind, or maybe there's one that's more relevant. That is, Lance, I love that new furniture because it's actually in one thing I'm going to talk about today. It's crazy. What's a recent change that you've made with hesitation? I wasn't real happy about it. I had a little bit of hesitation because we're kind of revamping it, our leading labs, just a little bit, because I know mornings are go time for people. And I also know that mornings are the prime time for cognitive energy. And so I wanted to create it so it's about 30 minutes. And then we're hanging on for the full 45. And whoever can hang on, that's when we'll move into groups or we'll just work as a large group. And so thank you for opening up chat and just sharing a recent change for you that is no longer traveling. Yes. Oh my gosh. We're headed to Houston in a couple of days. And we went back and forth. Do we fly? Do we drive? Do we take the bus? What are we doing? And Bonnie, I'm so excited for you too. She's starting her own thing, and I love it. And that is a huge change. And it's a combination of both of those. I think it hits both of those criteria of happiness and hesitation. Baxter, so many. So I'm going to keep moving, but we'll keep that open. And thank you for just sharing a couple of things. Before I get started with what I think are some really good tips for managing or navigating change a little bit better, I'll have an ask and I have an announcement. So the announcement is that we've got a brand new book coming out. Yay! And that should be ready to go in September, is what we're hoping for as far as the launch time goes for that. And the focus is going to be, of course, on the 7 brain-based strategies that we teach every single day, but a real emphasis on what makes a leader worth following. And so one of the pieces of this book is to collect responses from real people from many different perspectives. And this survey takes, on average, maybe 1.5 minutes. Okay, it's a very quick survey. We're going to ask 3 questions, which is an age group, because I'm curious to see if we see a difference in responses with age groups. We also have a question around your industry. That's going to be something that we're interested in seeing too. And then finally, the question, which is what makes a leader worth following to you? And Lance is going to put that link in there. We're sharing it with lots of, as much as we possibly can, because our goal is to get 1,500 responses. And so I'm asking you, if you've taken it, if you don't mind sharing it with your network, I would just be so grateful. So that's my ask, is for you to take it, and if you would just share that link with others, especially if you have networks of people that maybe are some different age ranges, different industries. So it's kind of fun, and I'm having a good time seeing the comments come in. And I'm really curious about what we're going to find out. So with that, throughout our 2025 Leading Lab series, we're going to be walking through these 7 brain-based strategies, just keeping it really simple. We'll take one strategy at a month, and today we're landing on challenge. And so what better place to start is challenge. So here's what I had in mind. I wanted to, first of all, talk about, what does a love sack sectional have to do with change? Why are our brains and change frenemies? Why is this? Why is that life is full of changes and yet our brain is designed to resist it? And finally, what are a few clever hacks to navigate change? And I've saved my favorite two to the very end. And that's a ploy to keep you here for the next 22 minutes. So in the book, on the chapter of change, a few truths that I believe to be true, at least, about change in studying the brain and seeing how people and organizations deal with change. I mean, this is something that we're seeing every single day. So one of them is that people resist what they don't understand. And I just think just keeping that in your pocket is so important, because whenever you're seeing resistance or you're hearing resistance, I want it to just kind of trigger, what is it about this they don't understand? And even though we think we might be being so clear, it's if we're seeing resistance, some of you are seeing resistance in your teams or in your organization, could be to anything, could be to new technology. Some of you are entrepreneurs and you're seeing resistance in your clients. Well, that's okay. Let's not get over the top with it, but just lean into what is it that they might not understand. The other truth that I wanted to start with is change most often requires a setback before a comeback. And just knowing that allows us to be a little bit more patient with ourselves and with others when it comes to change. And then finally, my final truth about change is easy until it involves people. And then it's going to get complicated. And so that's where we're headed. Okay, so just quick, you're always welcome to unmute. You know, we keep it really informal around here. And also, I have chat, and I'm looking at chat for those of you who don't want to unmute. That's fine too. Just going back to a couple of these truths about change. You know, one of the reasons why our brains resist is that, as you've read and you were studied when you were in any science class, your brain strives for homeostasis. That's for things to stay the same. And it's for really, if you think about it for our blood pressure, for our body temperature, for things to stay the same all the way across, physically and almost emotionally and psychologically too. It's really about our brain wants to hold on to what feels familiar. And I think that's a dangerous thing sometimes, because if we're not uncomfortable, if we are in the familiar, it might be that we're missing some real opportunities for growth. So think about, even if the change is super positive, it disrupts normal. And if it's, you know, I think about, so my love sack sectional, we got a sectional, we got new living room furniture. And in a sense, there has been some resistance, mainly on the part of Sherry, because the seating arrangement's different. What's this going to look like? You know, when we have people over, what's it going to look like if I'm wanting to work on the couch or I'm watching television? I know it sounds so silly, but it's been interesting to just kind of think about how I respond to change. So those are even positive changes. But when our brain perceives it as a negative threat, then we really start to see these truths surface. So what is considered negative threat? Negative threat to the brain is going to, at some level, involve one or usually all of these three things. First of all, there's an element of confusion. There's some uncertainty or some unknown. Okay, so the opposite of confusion, of course, is absolute clarity. And so just think about a change that you're going through right now. There's an element of uncertainty and unknown. I think to the point where you could probably pretty conclusively say your brain doesn't resist change, your brain resists confusion. And so that is a key, and it's a hint for something to come. The other is that we're anticipating some kind of adverse outcome, some kind of negative outcome. It could be something as simple, going back to my love sex sectional, that somebody's not comfortable where they're seated. So we're anticipating some kind of negative outcome. The third is that we don't feel like we have a lot of choice or voice over the change. So think about that in your own life. Those are typically the three criteria, and they can be experienced to varying degrees. And sometimes it's one more than others, and sometimes it's all three. So, the best example probably here is COVID. COVID's a great example of all three of those hitting the entire world. And so when this happens, we shouldn't be surprised to see some pretty crazy behavior in responses. But right now, I think we're all experiencing that at different levels, not only personally, but maybe in our country, it's in our world. There's a lot of this going on. So that just know that those criteria are going to equal some pretty daunting responses or reactions. Any thoughts about that, of how that's showing up for you? I'm just looking at chat. Yes.
I put something in chat, Sherry, that, is, do we ever have absolute clarity? And I think the scary part, especially for me, is just acting on some clarity, or at least what I think is some clarity. And then you act on it and then realize, was it enough clarity? Could I've gotten more clarity? And, you start questioning your thought process.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because I was thinking about a coaching call from yesterday. How much clarity do you need? I think different people need different levels of clarity, because clarity, I know I'm throwing all these C words out there, but clarity leads to confidence. So it's thinking really about how much clarity do I need? And some of us are more on risk averse than others. So it was a coaching call yesterday where someone needed to address a low performing employee, but what he lacked was clarity on if he should or not. And he's a very risk averse kind of person. So thanks for saying that. I like to think about changes, turning your snow globe upside down. Can you guys relate to that feeling of when everything that was familiar and everything that you knew was suddenly upside down, and you're just kind of like, whoa, like put me down. So here's what I see every single day. Because if I had to really say the number one thing that we're addressing every single day is change, is threat. And so when that negative threat shows up, let's not be surprised. We want to expect a reaction, okay? Expect it. And this is if it's for you or the team or the organization that you're leading. Almost expect a physical reaction, first of all, because it's different. It's throwing things out of homeostasis. So, your heartbeat might go up. You may have higher blood pressure. There's a stress response oftentimes in your body. What I don't want you to do, interpret that immediately as a bad thing. It's not always a bad thing. So expect a reaction. The second thing that we should expect when we're introducing change or going through change is resistance. There's going to be some level of triggering, and it can vary from a little bit of hesitation, maybe asking a few more questions, all the way to defiance. Okay, when we get really territorial and almost this idea of almost sabotaging the change. Expect restriction. What I mean by that is that a narrow-mindedness. So when your brain's under negative threat, your peripheral vision literally narrows. Great, because it allows us to focus on maybe that wild animal that was chasing us to kill us. But the same thing is happening internally. your brain kind of goes into a tunnel and it's hard to see a way out. So we want to expect a reaction. We want to expect resistance. I want you to expect restriction. And finally, because this is the R that I could come up with here, and they had to have all R's because I started, right? Is that we want to expect kind of a rev up. In other words, everything can be intensified. Think about what's in the tube of toothpaste is going to come out when it's squeezed. And when we're under change, we're under negative threat, or brain is perceiving it as such, you're going to see things intensified. So if someone is argumentative, you're going to see that intensified. If someone is, asks a lot of questions, you're going to see that intensified, and you're going to see that in yourself. So take a moment to reflect on those changes that you're going through, that you're creating, or that are happening to you. Because sometimes change is sort of, as I say, like FedEx driving up in your driveway and dumping a great big box in your yard. And you're sitting there going, I didn't order this. I didn't want what's in it. But nevertheless, it's in your yard to deal with. So, not going to lie, for me personally, the holidays and the start to 2025 were rough. Man, I had some boxes dumped in my yard that I did not order, I did not want. And, it's life, right? It's life. And so just think about where those 3 R's are showing up. So I wanted to give you some solutions, some ideas of things that we see work very effectively. So going back to this whole umbrella of challenge, the challenge which change falls underneath that is challenge is absolutely is connected with culture. So those of you who are leading, thinking more organizationally right now, can almost think about this continuum, that there's a continuum of organizations where it's a high threat culture. Here are some indications. You're going to hear people talking a lot about an overwhelm or burnout. You're going to hear them talking about feeling that. It's very task driven. In other words, it's one task after another, after another, after another. No, you never feel like you get off that wheel. You can feel stuck, and also there's lots of indications of low trust. On the other hand, all the way to when we're talking about this challenge idea, there's a challenge culture. Some of you are working in way better cultures, challenge cultures, where there's not an overwhelming burnout. In fact, there's like an urgency and an excitement to move on to accomplish a lot of things. Rather than just task after task, it's more purpose driven. There's real meaning and purpose in what you're doing. Not so much feeling stuck, but people are growing. You're developing, you're investing in your people, you're growing. There's indications of high trust. And I just wanted to point this out because where you are in this continuum is also a clue on how much resistance to expect with change. So if I'm introducing change and I'm over here in the red zone, everything's going to take longer. There's going to be an elevated degree of that reaction and resistance and the rev up and all those things. If I'm in that red, if green, man, green's like, if you've ever been on a road and you see a bunch of stoplights and they're all green, and you're just like, I'm having the best day because I'm hitting all these lights in the green. You just go faster. So you don't have as much of over here when you introduce change, and we've probably all had this experience. People are questioning everything. They're not trusting what you're asking them to do. It takes forever for people to get on board. You have people sabotaging. I've had situations that we work with where we've moved into a threat culture and the organization is trying to do something really great for their people and they're trying to sabotage it just because you're dealing with a threat culture. Versus all the way over here, I've seen where massive changes are being introduced, organizational changes, things that really hit home personally. And yet people are much more open. It goes much easier. And I would imagine some of you could tell story after story after story. So if you want to make change harder, create this kind of culture. As if change isn't hard enough, we can always make it harder. And if you want to make change easier, let's first start really thinking about how have we prepped the culture, and then the changes are going to come a lot easier. So I wanted to share that with you. I'm big right now into this whole idea of a compass versus a map. Because I think we're a lot better off. Map tells you exactly where you're going. Life just isn't that way. It's more like a compass. And so sometimes we get off course a little bit and we have to get back on. So that was my visual. And I wanted to talk about some ideas to help you navigate changes that you may be leading or you might be experiencing. So, one is, and again, I saved my favorite two to the end. First of all, expect the reaction. It's okay. Anxiety is not a bad thing. If you're feeling it in your body, all it's saying is wake up and pay attention. Your body's doing what it should. It's just giving you some feedback. So expect a reaction. Keep breathing. Sometimes 2 deep breaths can help you get right back on course. So, quick study I read about a couple of weeks ago. Looking at deep breathing actually activates a part of your brain called the anterior cingulate. And if I remember that correctly, so a pharmaceutical company came out with a pill to activate the anterior cingulate. And I'm thinking about, can't we just breathe deeply? Do we need a pill for that? The other thing is meet people where they are. Remember, people's reality makes sense to them. So before we create a big story that they're out to get us, or they're going to resist the change, or they're lazy, or they're stupid, or other things that I hear on the daily, let's just try to meet people where they are. So just a couple of things around that if you wanted to grab that. It's okay, breathe, meet people where they are, including yourself. It's okay to have a reaction to change. Let's just not create a story and give it meaning. Let's just get curious about it. What's it showing up to give us feedback on? It could be just, I've moved out of the familiar, so I'm going to expect it. It's like if you were going to work out harder than you normally do, well, expect some sore muscles. It just happens. It comes along with it. The other thing is, I would say, expect resistance to varying degrees, of course. You might experience more resistance if you are, if it's really unfamiliar, or if you're anticipating really adverse consequences. Keep communicating. You cannot over communicate. And I think too, it's really important to think about how you're communicating. Like, keep telling the story, which may actually be a narrative story, or it might be telling the story in data, right? So know how your audience needs to receive that information. You have lots of opportunities for people to ask questions. Keep answering questions. In your head, you might think, I've answered this question 50 times. But for them, it's the first time they've heard it. So you have to be the singer that has the one-hit wonder who has to keep singing the same song for 20 years with the same level of passion. The other thing that I would say is help make meaning. Remember, your brain's always giving events meaning. So if that's for you, then really take charge of what meaning you want to give this change. If it's for the people that you're leading, help them make the right meaning. They're going to create a story around it. So let's be sure that we're taking charge and we're helping them create the right story. And then involve those key stakeholders that are going to be instrumental to that change. And then my favorite phrase that I think can just help a whole lot is adding this to everything that you say, especially when you're leading change. And here's why. The coaching call I mentioned yesterday, that was a big piece that he had failed to bring to this team, that he was interpreting just was out to sabotage, his success. What he had failed to tell them is what they were being asked to do. There was a great big why behind it that he knew, but they didn't. Okay, a couple of other things. Expect restriction. In other words, for people to narrow. Keep breathing. Don't rush. Don't rush to reasoning. So your brain is more emotional than logical. Even if you don't feel that it is, that's the way the brain really processes information. So sometimes when we rush to reasoning with someone of why this change is going to be good for them, uh, all we're doing is creating more resistance and restriction. Rather, I want you to connect first, right? Relate to them, understand how they're viewing that. Then we can eventually get to reasoning. Tell the story. Again, tell the story in narrative form, how this is going to benefit, or maybe other people who've adopted this and success they've had. Tell the story in data if they're a person that needs to see that. Share the benefits of this change. Where there are options to give choices, that's going to reduce negative threat. Give lots of choices. Another idea is if you're introducing a change, connecting it to what already feels familiar. A lot of people are really good about this. They're saying, well, you know how you use a file cabinet like this, and this. Well, this is how this technology works. So all you're doing is connecting it to what already feels familiar, and it just reduces. Giving lots of channels for communication. What I mean by that is could be big group, could be small group, could be one-to-one, could be surveys, could be, I just want you to think about all the ways that you can field questions and all the ways that you can communicate. Really, really important. The other important piece about this is expect rev up. Whatever you currently have, expect it to intensify. So if you're currently working in a threat culture, expect it to intensify when you throw change into the mix. If you're working with this motivated, highly motivated culture, which, man, wouldn't that be great if every client we had, every team member we had was super highly motivated? That would be great. Doesn't always happen, but expect a rev up. So a couple of things here. I know that I've seen this on I've had this on every single one, but it's so important. Like, just keep breathing, because if you're leading change, what you're doing is you're a visionary leader. And that's a hard place to be, because you're trying to bring in something that people might not be familiar with. The other thing is you might not be popular. In fact, you might be kind of hated. People might be talking about you all the time. It's not an easy place to live. That's why a lot of people won't ever do it. Just keep breathing, though. Expect all of these things, they're natural. The one thing I would say is the brain takes a lot longer to change and a lot longer to learn than most of us think. So giving time. I know that you are hard charging. You see the vision, you've got the motivation, and we want to run forward really fast. But know that 80% of the population in the world is not like that. They are risk averse. Give time. Give time. And the last thing I would say is celebrate any small milestones. Stay in the gains, as we say, not in the gaps. Great book, Gains and Gaps. Celebrate any success, because what we tend to do is move on to the next thing, and what we haven't shown is the progress that we've made. So over the last year and a half, I've been really working on my health, and over that time lost about 30 pounds. And that's one that you could see tangible results in time, but at first not so much. And so I had to start really thinking about what are the little successes that I'm celebrating. So I know I'm 3 minutes over from the 8:30. Oh man, how did I miss this? Where is this? Oh, I know what it is. Hang on just a second. Okay. I wanted to share with you my two favorite tips above all. Okay, so above all, when it comes to leading change, I want you to just maybe jot these two things down. First of all, again, involve people. I would say if you're leading organizational change, map your stakeholders. And we've got a really cool tool for mapping stakeholders. You just shoot us an email if that would be helpful, or put it in chat. But map your stakeholders. Who are all the people that are going to be impacted by this change? Are they high influence? Are they high interest? So really identifying not only those key stakeholders, but also within that stakeholder group of the people who are the key influencers, the key decision makers. I want you to think about within that, who are your early adopters? Who are your innovators? So we want to bring them in as soon as possible to help you lead that change. So you're not doing it on your own. That's super important. I see organizations, and we've done it ourselves, miss that really important point. And then my second biggest tip of all, I find this really helpful. Every time you use the word change, just replace it with confusion. So if you think I'm going to lead a change, I want you to think in your head, I'm going to lead a confusion. Okay. If you think I am running the change management department, I want you to think I'm running the confusion management department. Because if we could replace the word change with confusion, I guarantee it's going to shift and hopefully make you more intentional about how you respond to it and how you lead it. So try it out. I think life should be just like a series of mini experiments. So, and when I say mini, not only in my Texas accent do I mean M-A-N-Y, but also M-I-N-I. All right. So it should be one experiment. So experiment with some of this stuff and see if it doesn't reduce the resistance, the restriction, the rev up. All right. So it's not going to eliminate it. Remember, we got to expect those things, but I guarantee you it will reduce it. Okay. So I'm going to stop our record.